Welcome to today's session. I'm Nick Smith from the National Lottery Community Fund, and I will be with you for the next hour, hopefully making sure that the session runs as smoothly as possible. This is our second Knowledge Series event from the current Engaging Communities series, and today's session is all about growing community involvement in climate action, and it's perfectly timed to complement our current Climate Action Fund, which we will share more details about in the chat towards the end of the session. So what's going to happen today? Well, first of all, you'll hear from my colleague Zoe Anderson about the research that she has done around engaging communities with climate action. Then we're going to hear from two projects about their work. So we have Aya O'Neill, Community Engagement Manager at Climate Action Fife, and we have Roy Kareem from Black and Green Ambassadors. And then we will be joined by Rick Casale, co-founder of Carbon Copy, and Kate Llewellyn, head of delivery at Herd. And then we'll move on to more of a Q&A session for the last part of the session. So thank you everybody for giving us your time and joining us today. We really do appreciate it, and we couldn't do these sessions without you. Before I shut up and hand over to Zoe, just one more reminder, if you're not on the panel, could you please switch your cameras off? That'd really help us. I can still see a few cameras on, so we just need those switched off. And also, let me just introduce my colleague Elvid Selman, who will be making sure that things go smoothly tech-wise. He'll be sharing more information about our guests and links to useful resources, and also he'll be keeping an eye on the chat as well. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and Elvid will try and bring them into the discussion if possible. Elvid is also a Welsh speaker, so if anybody wants to contribute in Welsh, you're more than welcome to. That's enough from me for the time being. Let me hand over to Zoe Anderson to set the scene for today's session. Over to you, Zoe.
Thanks, Nick. I'm part of the Knowledge and Learning team here at the National Lottery Community Fund, and I wanted to share some of the research we've done on this. As a community funder, a lot of our environmental funding involves engaging and motivating people and communities to take part. So I'd like to start by sharing some of the key ways our grant holders have done that. We know that the climate crisis can feel overwhelming. Research shows that messaging about how frightening it is can be paralysing. It can feel too big to do anything about. So sharing concrete, positive things that people can do is inspiring. It frames it as something you can do with tangible rewards, as something that works. We found that it helps to break things into clear, achievable steps. In Edinburgh, Networking Key Services and Edinburgh Lothian Regional Equality Council offered tailored support for minoritised communities, such things like waste management workshops for catering staff in Asian restaurants, as well as trips to the local recycling centre. So they were talking about the bigger picture and also showing very specifically what you can do in your workplace. In the same way, we've seen success from things like home visits for energy saving tips, various kind of green doctor organisations who will come to your home and spot ways where you can block drafts or improve insulation, practical solutions for you. It's important to look out for things that could get in the way of people taking part. So things like if you're organising a litter pick, make sure that you provide grabbers and bags. In Tamworth, the volunteer litter pickers supply kits with labels to make sure that the rubbish gets labelled properly, that everything's run smoothly. The point is to make it easy for people to just show up and get involved, that there are no barriers preventing them doing that. We've seen that sharing local examples makes it easier to see how it's relevant and can help to build a sense of community as people are working together to protect their local area. And we know that time and place can provide hooks to get people involved. We'll be hearing later from Ia at Ia of Climate Action Fife about their work, but I was really struck by the way that they used the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow to build momentum for the Big 5 for Fife campaign, which was about getting people to pledge to make achievable everyday changes. So that's both kind of responding to what's big stories in the news and connecting it to local daily life. So showing how it's relevant, showing what you can do. It's also really important to share the co-benefits, because things you do to save energy will also reduce fuel bills. Tool libraries, where you can borrow rather than buying a drill or a spade, can save you money as well as reducing waste. And for the same reason, you can connect with parents through things like uniform and toy exchanges. A community allotment will have lots of environmental benefits, but you can also promote it as a chance to learn skills, a way to meet people, improve health and well-being. So people who might not be that interested in being green could still get on board to save money or improve their health, or for those other reasons. And it really helps to show the difference that you're making, that setting and meeting targets can be very motivating, that it's a concrete way to sort of see and share positive changes. In Northern Ireland, the Footprints Women's Centre installed solar panels and put the controls in the foyer of their building with a big display. So everyone who comes in can see how much money is being saved, how much CO2 is being saved, how much energy is being saved, those numbers ticking up. And staff make it a talking point, a way to raise awareness, to start conversations about sustainability. And that kind of energy and enthusiasm, that kind of wish to share news and stories and ways you can do things, can make a big difference as well. That good role models can really help motivate people. Many of our grant holders, and actually the fund itself, have a green champion scheme, so that there are people who sign up to be champions and to help keep sustainable behaviour in at the front of people's minds. We've also found that kind of senior buy-in can be really helpful for things like that it makes it possible to set targets and build sustainable behaviour into your business planning. There are lots of ideas on ways you might do that in our page on making an environmental action plan, which Elwood will share the link to. The last thing I wanted to say is there's a stereotype of green action as being very middle class and very white. So it's essential both to diversify the leadership and to recognise the work that's already being done by different communities. I've talked about making it kind of specific and relatable. So we know it really helps to see people like you, whoever you are, at the head of the movement. Again, Elwood will share some links around that sort of diversifying leadership questions. And I'd also like to highlight the importance of paying living wages, that this is for everybody. So it's important that everybody can afford to do this work. We'll be hearing more from Roy and the Black and Green Ambassadors later, but I wanted to mention one of the workshops that Black and Green Ambassadors ran, which was looking at sustainable cooking and eating, and which highlighted how many cultural practices are already very sustainable, that climate action is about working to change behaviour. But I just wanted to end by saying I think it's also really important to celebrate and promote the things that work, to recognise the things that are already successful. Thank you. Now I'll hand you back to Nick.
Thank you, Zoe. And we'll be digging into some of those points in more detail in a bit too. And I've managed to get my camera working, so everything's okay. I can see myself. So now we're going to hand over to Ia O'Neill, Community Engagement Manager at Climate Action Fife, to tell us a bit more about the work that they've been doing there. Over to you, Ia.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So yes, I work for Climate Action Fife. I'm the project manager, but I work for Greener Kirkcaldy. We're a charity and development trust in Kirkcaldy and Fife, and we're the lead partner for the Climate Action Fife project. So today I'm gonna tell you about one specific project or campaign we've been doing, because we are working on a lot of different strands, and we have 12 different partners doing work. So I thought let's focus in on our Fruit Tree for Every Garden in Fife campaign as an example of how we engage local people in Fife. So as the campaign says, we're hoping to get a fruit tree into every garden in Fife. We have a limited number of free trees to give away at special events each winter, but we're also organising workshops to help people learn how to take care of their trees. And we have a range of other ways that people can get involved in the campaign. So they can plant a tree, but they can also map fruit trees. So if they already have fruit trees in their gardens, we're asking them to put their trees onto our open green map. And if you don't have a garden and want to get involved, you can become a tree warden. So we have a Fife tree warden group of people, and tree wardens are working across the UK, I believe, but they are local tree champions who plant, look after and stand up for trees in their patch. And also people can donate to, we've set up a Fife Community Tree Fund. It's on My Park Scotland. It's a crowdfunding page. So it's a way to try to attract some private funding for more trees in years to come, but also we're also promoting it as a way of sort of paying forward. If you don't need a free tree and you want somebody else to have one, donate to the fund. We developed the campaign using the shifting normal behaviour change approach. It helps groups try to tackle climate change by maximising success, looking at how change actually happens when you plan and carry out and review your activities. There's 4 key questions and 4 zones, and it's all based on the individual, social and material tool developed by Scottish Government, but it's a community version of that. So we went through this approach to develop the campaign. We've had an overwhelming interest in campaign. Over 2,000 people registered an interest in the autumn. We've never had anything like that happen before, which is really exciting. Obviously, a free fruit tree was a major draw, but people have also got involved in all the other ways that we put out there. We've had over 100 people get in touch to say they would help distribute the trees, promote the campaign. Some people said they would help plant, and other community groups that we hadn't heard from before were saying, oh, we'd like to plant trees in our communities. So we could then, put them in touch with our community tree planting officer, because that's a different kind of project. We are focusing on gardens in this campaign. And we also found that the green map has been a really powerful engagement tool. It's really been a two-way process that a lot of people have enjoyed getting involved in. So we're kind of halfway through the first sort of winters of distribution of trees, and we already have over 400 sites with trees that people have put their trees on the green map. So we're bowled over with that. So I talk about green maps. So I just want to show you some pictures if I can. This is always interesting. So I hope you can see this. This is our nice sort of graphic for a fruit tree for every garden in Fife. So a green map. So what is an interactive map? And this is what you will see if you go onto our website at the first glance. So that is trees that have been mapped across Fife, and as you can see, we pretty much cover the whole of Fife, which is great. And then you can zoom in, and you can find out the different icons are obviously different types of trees. So that's where people have noted that they have something in their garden. But we also have a community garden and a community orchard icon. So the heart down there is Ravenscraig Walled Garden, which is Greener Kirkcaldy's own community garden. So what you can do as an individual is you can put up a picture and you can put up a little description. So we've done that. And then here is somebody called Roy, who has told us that he has these 2 trees in his garden. He hasn't put up a picture, but a little description. So that's just an example of what people have done in all these places across Fife. I'll stop sharing now. So I think that's probably my time up. Is that right, Nick? Or would you like me to say a little bit more?
You can have another minute or so if you want
to. Minute, right?
You are still sharing your screen, by the way. I can still see it. I don't know if anybody else can.
Cancel. Is it gone now?
No, it's still there.
Elfred, could you stop me from sharing? Because for me, I've cancelled it and it's not there. So
I will give it a quick go now behind the scenes.
Throw me out.
You carry on, just finishing up then.
Okay. So I was just going to say, yeah. So why do we think it's worked so well? We really think it's tapped into people's connection to nature and people's interest in growing things. Also, there is an interest in local seasonal food. So trees obviously give you more than just pleasure. They also give you the food to eat in your garden. And we feel that there's a real pride in the local community and your local area, and people want to be part of something that makes Fife a better place to live. And we also think we've developed a really solid campaign using the shifting normal approach. We really took time to understand what would help or what would hinder people do this, and then develop resources to overcome those barriers. So for example, we have a tree planting guide, and we have a video that shows people how to plant a tree and look after it. And we have the workshops again for people to feel they can do this. And also we knew the cost of trees would be a barrier, so that's why we have some free trees. We're also grafting trees at the moment so that we have cheaper trees next year for people. And setting up the community tree fund is also an attempt to try and attract funding so that we can fund free trees for people next year. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ia.
I hope I'm not sharing anymore.
Well, I can still see it. So what I'm going to say, that if it's not working, it might be worth just quickly logging off and logging back in again quickly to close it all down and come back in while Roy's talking. Does that sound okay? Great. So now I'm going to hand over to Roy Kareem, who's going to tell us a bit more about Black and Green Ambassadors and the work that he's doing in Bristol. So over to you, Roy.
Cool. Thank you, Nick. Hey, everybody. I'm Roy Kareem. And I'm going to talk to you about the Black and Green Ambassadors program in Bristol. I will put, after I've stopped chatting, I will put a link in the chat to a film that was made about the program, which can probably do a better job overall explaining about all the intricacies, because it's like a 10-minute film. So don't click it and go and watch it before you finish with this call, but it is a good overall summary. So I'll stick that in the chat afterwards. I am based at a place called the Centre for Sustainable Energy in Bristol, which is a national charity, where I currently run something called Bright Green Future, which has its origins as a National Lottery community funded project, because it's an environmental leadership program for teenagers, trying to diverse leadership within the environmental sector, but focused on young people. But the Black and Green Ambassadors program, so I guess the context was that it was set up after or during Bristol being named European Green Capital back in 2015, and conversations starting in the city amongst its communities of colour, i.e. its Afro-Caribbean community, its South Asian community. Conversations were started going, we either feel left out of some of these conversations that are happening around Bristol being super green, and we would like some kind of platform or space where people from those communities could express themselves, feel more welcome, get some potentially development opportunities to step into sort of different leadership areas within this sort of green world that was being celebrated in 2015. So something called the Green and Black Ambassadors was started, and then after maybe 18 months, thought they were going to be sued by a chocolate company, so switched to being the Black and Green Ambassadors. And that original one was a pilot program. Two amazing people, Jazz and Zakia, were the original ambassadors, and they were going out doing different bits of community research, doing some sort of content creation, be that through photography, or the other big bit was that it was based at this amazing community radio station called Ujima FM in Bristol, which is a Black owned and run station in the city of Bristol, which has about 10,000 regular kind of listeners. So they, as a partner within this original program, meant that Jazz and Zakia could go out and have a radio show and sort of use journalism and public facing things to really engage a different set of people with some of these environmental conversations. So fast forward, if you remember the sort of early days of the pandemic, then they got some community fund money to restart the program as the Black and Green Ambassadors. They put out the word for new people to apply. I was one of those people, and I was lucky enough to get it. So myself, Olivia Sweeney, and Asia Youssef became the new ambassadors. And really, the program was about giving us a platform to engage with these sort of diverse and underrepresented communities, while at the same time developing ourselves as communicators, as broadcasters. So it was a partnership between UGM-FM, again, the radio station, and something that was called the Bristol Green Capital Partnership, another sort of umbrella organisation in Bristol. So what we had was this amazing opportunity to do outreach with communities, to have a regular broadcast slot on the radio station. So every month we had a 2-hour radio show that we put together, all about the intersection of ethnicity and environmental issues and what that looks like. And then the third bit was to do our own research. And that research was really sort of community focused. So could we go out into these communities that we were saying we wanted to sort of represent and actually do work with them? So Olivia ended up doing hers on air inequality within Bristol. So why is it the communities that contribute the least to air quality suffer the worst consequences of it? Asia did hers on something that was actually mentioned at the beginning of this call around sustainability practices within people that have come to Bristol from different countries. So sort of recognizing that people are being quote unquote sustainable, even when they might not use that language, and so putting it in their language. And then my one was all about how people used urban green spaces as sort of sources of well-being, especially, and again, if you think back a few years during the pandemic and what those green spaces meant to them, how they used them growing up, how that had changed. And I created a podcast series out of that, where I was interviewing people and sort of trying to share those stories. And then my time is almost up. And then that really sort of led to the final bit of the program for us, which wasn't planned, which was that we were invited to go up to COP26 in Glasgow to sort of present the program in the official, I always get it wrong, the blue stage or the green stage, or one of the zones where you sort of need a special pass to get into. And that was a real opportunity to sort of put the Black and Green ambassadors on a national stage. And it was sort of a lovely way to sort of, I guess, end our time as ambassadors. So, yeah, we were sort of, I guess, a trailblazer in that moment within the conversations that are happening around the UK of how do we diversify the communities we want to engage with, and how through something like doing a radio show do we sort of present it in a different way. And people have already talked about how you talk about things, how you make things inspiring rather than sort of doom and gloom. And that's what we were sort of constantly trying to do. Like, how do we put this in language that communities that we want to target are actually, that's the way they're communicating and the way they're already speaking, as opposed to sort of, you know, a lot of the jargon that we can get into in the sustainability world. So I will stop there because I'm out of time. I will put the film link in the chat, and then I'll be around for questions later on. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you very much. So now I would also like to introduce our other two guests. So first of all, Rick Casale, co-founder of Carbon Copy. Rick, would you like to just introduce yourself, your background, and why you've got an interest in this topic?
Yeah, thanks very much, and hi everybody. For those of you that don't know, Carbon Copy is a UK climate action charity that helps drive more big thinking local action. And unlike, say, Aya and Roy, we don't actually lead on specific projects, but instead we're more of an aggregator and a communicator. And one of the ways that we help to drive more activity is through a publishing platform. And we have 1,000 different organizations that have shared their different initiatives for others to copy and adapt. Roy, Black and Green Ambassadors is on there, and Aya, we'll get Climate Action Fife on there shortly after this call. One of the reasons why it's so powerful is because you can read or you can listen to their climate action stories in their own words. And I think this aspect of what Carbon Copy does is pretty relevant to the conversation we're having, because we're taking a relationship approach in our communications. It's really based on names and not numbers. And what we believe at Carbon Copy is that people inspire other people, and that this is how we mobilize change.
Thank you, Rick. And I would also like to introduce Kate Llewellyn from Heard. Kate, could you introduce yourself as well, please?
Lovely. Thanks, everybody, and hello. So I'm Kate. I'm the head of delivery at Herd. And what Herd does, we're a charity. We work with people, the media, and institutions, and we help them spark stories that lead to change. So on climate, the project that I've had the pleasure of running and now overseeing, we really focus on helping storytellers make sure that they're telling stories that will actually lead to change. So we bring up-to-date communications research insights to people at any point of the stage of kind of talking about climate change to big audiences. So the thing that's really exciting to me here is we have so much potential when we think about the role that communities can play when they're communicating on climate change. And I think we can sometimes maybe see it as a bit of an overlooked area. But actually, when you think about the fact that more than 81% of people here in the UK really care about climate change and they want to see more action, I know there's a huge number of people out there who could be really kind of advocating for change, talking about climate differently. And yeah, we're really interested in how to have conversations about how to tell really impactful stories.
Thank you, Kate. So you've now met all our guests for today. So the second part of the session will be more of a chat, Q&A around a few related questions. And Kate, I will start with you and what you've just described there. And well, today's session is all about engaging communities. And how can we, first of all, communicate what is often complex issues, massive issues, doom and gloom, I think I heard Roy mention earlier, these big messages in a way that resonates with communities?
Yeah, it's the big question, isn't it? And it was so good to kind of hear loads of times throughout everything we've talked about already, that move away from pure doom and gloom narratives into what I like to call and what Herd likes to call can-do messaging. I think that'd be the first thing to me that's so key here. I think we can sometimes fall into that trap of thinking that fear motivates people more than we think. But actually, if we are repetitively telling people it's too late, there's no way out of it, and then we're confused why they're not engaging, I think that's kind of a bit of an issue there. So I think for me, communications that can first of all point to a really specific solution, but can use that really can-do language throughout everything they do is fantastic. And Ia, I was really kind of fangirling over all of the stuff you were sharing earlier, which, you know, is so fantastic to see how many trees have already been planted in Fife, and you could see that kind of can-do language coming out there. So I think that's the first thing for me. And the second, I'm kind of coming back to a few things that have already been said already, but my real drum to bang is around what jargon does to people. I think it can be really hard to work out how we can tell stories in really straightforward and down to earth ways, but we can really take the time to do it and to get it right, have conversations with people, kind of say, like, does this make sense to you? What's not clear? And then get to something that feels really good and really straightforward. Because my thing is, jargon doesn't just make people switch off, it makes them feel bad about the issue and bad about themselves. And again, communication should make people feel good, and it should make people feel included and involved and inspired. So we need to take the time to get that really right. I could keep banging on, but I think I'll pause there and see if you wanted to throw it over to somebody else.
Yeah, I'll come to you next, Rick. I can see you've got your hand up as well. The thing that resonated with what you were saying as well, Rick, was that big thinking, local climate action. That to me is around this translation piece as well. So go ahead, Rick.
Thanks. I just want to build on what you're saying, Kate. I think in terms of trying to communicate something that's so unwieldy and also potentially just doom and gloom, one of the ways that we are trying to encourage people to think about taking that next step and do something more collaboratively, locally, is to focus on single issues. And even the word issue is probably the wrong word, it's probably opportunities. So we would look at something like affordable energy and use that as an entry point to talk to people about community energy groups and schemes and what that looks like in practice. Or for instance, you can talk about clean air. You know, Roy was talking about, you know, clean air in locally in the Bristol environment. And that leads to, well, active travel schemes or tree planting, etc. And obviously they're not exclusive. So you can also talk about health and wellness. And it'll also translate to things like active travel schemes. But the point is, we're coming at it from a point of view of a benefit that people can relate to, and ideally something that they can then see tangibly happen in their local area when they get involved with a project. And I think that's a really key motivator as well, and really the power of a lot of place-based action, which is you see a lot of your collective action happening around you. You make the world around you a better place, and that's a big motivator.
Thanks, Rick. And if I could just focus on that for a bit then, so about seeing that sort of place-based local action and seeing what's happening. Maybe this is one for Ia or Roy, but what approaches or activities have you found useful on the ground? So Ia, we heard about your fruit tree scheme. What other sort of activities have you found really useful in getting the community involved in climate action?
Food, things to do with food, cooking, eating. Again, it's something that most people can do. So we're always matching up the message of we have a workshop series called Plate Up for Fife, with 3 sessions that people join, and they start off by some science facts and some things about the climate emergency, and then it turns into focusing on local seasonal food and what you can cook. And also we always talk about meat and dairy, but we have to be quite, that's a sort of has to be handled well, how you talk about reducing meat and dairy, especially in some of our communities. So, but yeah, so, and people then end up cooking. So that's an example.
Thank you. And Roy, oh, sorry, Rick, go ahead.
So I just want to build on that. I'm just thinking about a number of the different project examples that have been shared with us. And one of the things that may sound really obvious, but it's really powerful, is having a physical space for people to actually come together. And these different spaces draw in different communities, even though ultimately they're addressing the same thing. So just as a practical personal example from my borough, we have an eco action hub that does all the kinds of things you would expect of an eco hub. It's very green, and it drives that kind of an audience. But at the same time, we also have a community pub, and that community pub does everything from free bicycle repairs to helping people feel more comfortable riding bikes if you know that they've learned to cycle relatively late, repairing stuff, clothes swaps, etc. That community pub is doing a lot of the same stuff that the Eco Action Hub is doing, and yet it's drawing in a very different community, and it's drawing in a lot of people who wouldn't identify themselves as being particularly green or eco, and yet they're doing all of those things that have a positive impact on the environment and on the climate. And that's happening because of the physical space and because of the sense of community. So I think it's really important when we hear some feedback from our project owners that they say having a physical space to congregate is a really important part.
Thanks, Rick. Roy, can I come to you on kind of what Rick was mentioning there about attracting different communities and stuff like that? If projects are wanting to engage underrepresented communities with climate action, give them a platform to participate, what advice do you have from your experience, Roy, around that?
I love stories as a way in, as in I love listening to people's stories as a way in, where you perhaps not even, I mean, maybe to Rick's previous point as well, you're not even engaging initially anyway in the language of climate or sustainability. Like with my ones, it was sort of, you know, the way into my kind of bit of the Black and Green Ambassadors was to sit with people on a park bench, take my little recorder out and go, yeah, so like, how did you grow up using this space? Or like, oh yeah, I used to come here with my family, or, you know, I bring in my kids here. And, you know, we would not be talking about emissions or, you know, or anything to do with that. And I do, this is probably a personal preference, but I do love sort of the fluffy, non-measurable stuff as a way in for a lot of these sort of things. This is, you know, slightly tangential, but I think it's related with the young people that I work with on Brightening Future. Our other way in is sort of around the sort of personal development angle of trying to link up the personal to the planetary as we talk about it, which is what's good for you, hopefully, in terms of your mental health and your well-being and everything else, is also coincidentally probably also good at a planetary scale when you scale it up. And actually going in at the personal level can sometimes avoid all of the politicization and the cultural stuff that can come with, I think, the larger scale stuff, which is, you know, about net zero and, you know, livable neighborhoods and all the other kind of stuff that sort of can, I think, hit more barriers, as opposed to what we did with the Black and Green Ambassadors, which is almost bring it back to just like a person's story and that way in. So yeah, making it about hearing the person's story and sort of going from there is probably the place that I would often start.
Alfred, I can see you've got your hand up. Come on in.
So yeah, just while you were mentioning that, Roy, about working with young people, we've had a question in the chat specifically about how do you engage young people with the climate action space. Now, you've already touched on it there, but I thought I'd jump in to sort of open it up to the rest of the panel, if that's all right, or if you'd like to carry on, Roy.
I mean, I'll always carry on, but I'll let someone. Rick, you jump in, and I can come back in.
Thanks. Okay. Well, here's a connection that I'm making, which is I think you have to think a bit more outside the box if you want to reach different communities, be it communities of color, underrepresented communities, younger audience. And, you know, one of our most successful programs that we're involved in is called Running Out of Time. And just to give you an idea, like 80% of the respondents, our survey respondents, tell us that they want to do more to address the climate crisis. That's huge. 40% pledged to join a community climate action group. And yet what is Running Out of Time? It's actually a mass participation relay event from Ben Nevis to Big Ben. Like, where did that come from? Now, on the route, we highlight and we talk to amazing people, amazing projects. We gather all of those stories. And all those people that participated in this event for a whole lot of other reasons come into contact, come into this space that they weren't in before, and they get energized by it. So they get really motivated and inspired by the people that are on the ground doing great stuff, and they want to be a part of it. And so I think this relay event is an example of creating visibility, of engaging people in a very different way, to your point, Roy, kind of like an on-ramp. We're not talking net zero at all. We're not talking about the climate crisis directly, but they're hearing about it and coming into it from a different angle, and it's working really well. So I would say that maybe that's potentially how we think about engaging some of these communities that are currently overlooked.
Thank you, Rick. Ina.
I was going to say that when we did our development project, we realised that, well, we tried to engage with young people, and we probably hadn't been that good at it. So when we applied for our award, we involved Youth First, which they're the youth sector umbrella body for Fife. So they are already working with youth groups and young people across Fife. So they have a Climate Action Fife youth worker based with them, who's part of our team. So because we realised that they're the people that do that best, and the youth work has developed a whole special programme. So is sort of tasked with working with 12 to 25-year-olds. So I think that's, find the people who are already speaking to young people. Don't maybe try to become a youth worker yourself. They know how to do that, and then give them the tools and the knowledge to be part of that.
And just to add to your point, Aya, we work with Let's Go Zero. So depending on how young you're talking about when you're talking youth, but it's a fantastic schools program. And, you know, they're a key part of this running out of time piece as well. But to your point, don't reinvent the wheel. That's very much what Carbon Copy is about. They're really smart people and organizations probably doing exactly what you would like to do. It's a question of collaborating and working with them to make it happen.
Thank you, Rick. What we sometimes get asked by our funding staff is around how can communities demonstrate their impact as a way of growing involvement. And what I've heard a lot today is storytelling and the importance of storytelling from the panel. So Kate, could I come to you on this one and just, you know, have you got any examples of what a good story looks like? What, you know, how to tell the story of these complex issues?
I can definitely talk about it from the point of view around kind of what frames we can use when we're telling stories. I can also, like Roy, very much feel a lot of empathy around kind of the measurableness of the challenges we have around measuring this sort of narrative work. I think for me, the stories that we can really be telling can be kind of highlighting the change that's underway and pointing to where we need more of it. I think that's a really compelling story to tell in climate change generally, looking at the fact that where the climate story is at, most people in the UK want to see more change on climate. But if you ask people, you know, do you yourself care? They'll say yes. And if you say, do other people care about climate change and want to see more action? They'll say, you know, majority no. So we've got this kind of real disconnect. So I think everything we do really needs to tell that story of, look, loads of people out there really care. They want to see change. Let's get going. So I think that would be the kind of the thing that I would be saying. And I'd also be pointing to the less traditional ways of telling stories. I think really feels in kind of narrative reports or write-ups. And I think the most compelling stories can be kind of short, sharp videos that you've asked people to kind of say why they're involved in this work, talk about the changes they want to see, and just lead with the story, lead with the really relatableness of kind of why people get involved. So that would be my kind of 2 cents on that one.
Go ahead, Rick.
Hi, Nick. I think you're talking about wanting to get a little bit more idea around measurement and what we're trying to measure. And yeah, building on your point, Kate, the metrics that people say they measure in all the projects that they share with us range from the very tangible stuff to do with the projects to the wider benefits socially, etc. But I think there's a really important thing, which is context. Just to take a step back, we've got like 380 local authority areas across the UK. Like 80% of them have declared a climate emergency. Bristol, as you know, Roy, was the very first one, I think back in 2018. Half of our local authority areas want to get to net zero by 2030. Half of them have area-wide plans that they have developed in consultation with community groups, with local businesses, etc. So these climate action plans already exist. They are owned locally, and communities play a key role in the delivery. You know, they co-authored a lot of these. And so I think in terms of measurement, one of the things to do is to go back to your local area climate action plan and see how you're doing relative to that. Because a lot of the projects, both community-led or led by other businesses or other stakeholder groups, collectively are all coming together to drive that shared plan. So I think in many ways, a lot of work has been done already. Climate Action UK, actually a great organization, goes through a lot of effort to scorecard those climate action plans and rate how the progress is going. So, you know, you've got people that are holding others to account, but the plans are there. So I think that's a great point of reference and a great place to go to in terms of measuring your success and impact relative to your goals and where you would like to be.
Thank you, Rick. My next question is around how organisations, charities, projects can work with businesses and community spaces who may not be associated with climate action and get them involved in climate action, get them to start taking steps. So what can we do to work with other community businesses and organisations and get them part of the journey? And that's to anybody who would like to step in.
I wonder if oh, sorry, Ia, do you want to go for it? Okay,
We'll
I'll
go
start.
Kate and then we'll go Ia, if that's okay.
I'm taking this once again from a very kind of top line, like how to shape your message point of view. I think sometimes we can feel like we have to, the only way that we can talk about climate and change is by talking about statistics and data and the real kind of sciencey reasons behind why people should be involved. And I think the thing that was really clear in our research, that the most effective way of kind of bringing people into this conversation is by making it really relatable to them, which we talked about here today. And there are two things I wanted to really shout about here. The thing that comes out really clearly in our research is by evoking our responsibility to young people living now and to future generations is one of the most effective ways to bring people in. It makes it really inarguable when you say, look, we've got this thing going on. Do you want to be involved? We're doing it because, you know, we just want to get things right for young people living now and future generations. Most people would find that quite difficult to argue with. The other thing that we really find has been helpful, and that came out of our research, is by framing this as kind of how our health is connected and relies on the planet being healthy too. And using metaphors like the body, the planet as a body metaphor, talking about how we might have harmed the planet, but we can heal it too. It's in all of our best interests to kind of get it right, have healthy planet, healthy air for generations to come. And then that kind of really connects in with people. And I'm imagining that Ia has some much more practical tips. So I'll stop there and hand over to you, Ia.
Thank you, Kate. And that's what the session's all about. It's about all levels. So thank you very much. Ia, over to you.
But I'm nodding away, and I like to hear, because I think that those frames and the connection to nature, pride in your local area, health, and so all those things that people care about, and then they also care about the climate, because it's the same agenda. So our leaflet, our general leaflet, says "for the love of Fife," and that's why we want to get over this. That's why we're doing this. In relation to businesses, we have two very specific offers in our we have a small activity strand called Climate Friendly Business. So we offer businesses help in relation to energy and in relation to food waste. So we have tips and hints. We have one of my colleagues can go out and talk to people about what they can really practically do in their business premises, both on those things. And we also try to keep our ears and eyes open for any kind of funding or any other support that's out there, and just make sure that we amplify it, because we find that our council, for example, and our business gateway, usually there is some funding, but it's they tend to forget to promote it. So we help them do that, and sometimes we also get small projects where we're actually doing that. But other than that, we just try to amplify the message and get it out to businesses. And again, businesses want to be part of the places where they are. So it really is about also talking to them about how these things and how the climate and the environment is important to people. So then it's also important to them. And they are all people who are interested in the place that they work in.
Go ahead, Rick.
Just to build on this, Nick, climate action networks come in all kind of shapes and sizes, but some of them have been set up very much with the purpose of getting different stakeholder groups together So to answer your question, it's a forum for businesses, for charities, for community groups to be represented, for the local council. Some are far more developed than others. And so I would just encourage people to look at where those climate action networks or partnerships are established and working well, and see whether you can copy those. Roy, you might want to speak to it. I know Bristol is, you know, one of the front runners. It's got a very well established kind of structure with lots of different stakeholder groups.
Yeah, I mean, there's many things, and I'm always surprised that there are things going on in Bristol which, you know, different networks between businesses and public institutions that I'd never heard of. Like we've got things like a green mingle where businesses get together with people working on sustainability within the city. There's the national, which I didn't know about, the you know, is it People, Pie and Planet, or the other way around, Pie, Planet and People, or, you know, which is a self-organizing thing around the UK. And I only found out about it because someone said, and I was like, oh, it's been running for ages, where businesses and people working in sustainability and climate action projects all get together all around the UK in different locations. And yeah, I think, again, I'm going to come in with a final fluffy point, because that's what I like, which is when we're engaging with young people around this kind of stuff. There's the quote from Spider-Man, which is, "With great power comes great responsibility," which we used to use with young people, because I thought it was just an inspiring thing to say to a 17-year-old, until some 17-year-olds were like, well, we don't really feel like we've got any power, so what does that mean about our responsibility? And so we flip it now, and we say, with great responsibility can come great power, which is actually working them through, you didn't cause any of this. And this could be for young people, this could be people, you know, with low economic status, of like, you didn't cause this, but can we work through to a place where actually you step into it and you go, actually, I do have some responsibility as just like a citizen. And from that place, that's when you step in to go, okay, once I take some responsibility as just a moral human citizen part of this, that's where I can actually feel like I can get some power and some agency and start to work from that place, as opposed to sort of feeling powerless and rudderless. And so, yeah, it's hopefully a sort of useful starting point with sort of any community, though it does require sort of a deeper level of engagement, obviously.
Thank you, Roy. I've just had the dreaded 5-minute warning. So what I'm going to ask you to do, in about 30, if you could take about 30 seconds, I'm going to go around each one of you, and if you could just share stuff that's coming up that's exciting you about your work, what you've got coming over the next few months. This is your opportunity to share all the great stuff that you're doing. I'll stick with you, Roy, if you want to go first. What you're looking forward to over the next months around climate action?
Yeah, actually I stuck it in the chat recently, which is a project I'm working on with the University of Bristol, which is basically, I guess, a mental health and wellbeing project working with their PhD students. They're very stressed out PhD students who want a space, and this is to Rick's point of sometimes it's just literally about creating a physical or a mental space to talk about issues around nature and climate. And so we've got funding from the universities to run that. We did it last year. We're doing it again this year. And what I put in the chat was a film about it. So we're going to be starting again with a new group of students over the next few months. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And yeah, Bristol is a hotbed of things, but we're slowly getting better at sort of talking about them and communicating about them. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Roy. Kate?
My one's a little bit kind of tangential, but it does relate, and I'll come back to that. My colleague just kickstarted a piece of work working with people and organisations in the football, climate and fan space, thinking about how can footballers really normalise how many people care, and the fact that they also really care about climate change and they want to see a difference. So I'm really interested about that, thinking about how many fans there are in the UK and thinking about how they are their own community group all across the UK. So keep an eye on her social media for when this video comes out.
Thank you, Kate. And while you're talking, there's going to be there might be a poll pop up on the screen about this session, and there might be some more information about the Climate Action Fund in the chat as well, just so we can get that in before the end. Ia, over to you next.
Yes, in a couple of weeks, mine is very sort of practical. we're bringing together the partnership steering group. So we'll have all 12 partners together, 1 or 2 people from each partner, and we have, this time it's a steering group and a study visit. So we go to one of the partners, their eco hub, funny enough, and have a couple of hours where they show us around or give us a training input or do whatever they want with us. And then we have the steering group meeting as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody and having partners in the room. And it's always really nice to meet in person. We don't do that very often. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to a good lunch and some good chat between the different organisations.
Great stuff. And Rick, over to you.
Thanks. 3 things. 1, we're following in Roy's footsteps. We are about to release a new series of our Carbon Copy podcast, and that's all about bringing these stories to life in a different way. We've been working with the Met Office, and we're about to release climate warming stripes for every local area in the UK. They're the ones that go from blue to red. Sadly, red means hotter than average, and there's just a bunch of red stripes over the last 20, 30 years. They are a way to start bigger conversations about what we can do in our local area to address the climate, and that climate change is happening where we live. And then the third thing we're excited to be working on is, we're working on Running Out of Time, which covers Scotland, Wales, and England over 30 days. Again, we just want to talk to a wider audience and bring them into the fold.
Thanks, Rick. Perfect timing, everybody. Can I just thank all our panel members today for a really interesting session and for sharing your experiences so generously. Thanks to my colleague Zoe and to Alvid as well, who's just popped up a quick poll for you there, just to get a quick snapshot of how you found the session. A more in-depth evaluation will be dropping in your inboxes soon. This is the second out of 4 events, so we still have 2 sessions left. Again, we'll post some more information in the chat about those. We've got building healthy neighbourhoods, and we've got youth volunteering as well, and we were talking about getting young people more involved today as well. So final thanks just to everybody who's come along today. I hope you enjoyed the session, hope you're interested in future events, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks everybody. Bye bye.